Hi, welcome to the books of 1 and 2 Timothy. You are going to love these books. Now, we have 3 parts to these books. What does that mean? We have 3 snapshot videos that is going to give you the historical context, and we're going to have 3 weeks of dives and deep dives on the Trasher Bible website that you can jump into to really adventure through this book. Whatever that looks like for you, you can do it in 3 weeks or do the whole sections. We just wanted to give you content for 3 sections in the books of 1 and 2 Timothy. Now, the books of 1 and 2 Timothy are found in the New Testament. And in the New Testament, you've got some letters that are named after the people that the letter is written to. So you've got Timothy, you've got Titus, you've got these letters are named after the recipients. You've also got letters that are named after the churches. So you've got Ephesians and Corinthians and Galatians. Galatians is actually an area that it's named after. And then you've got authors that the letters are named after the author. So Peter, James and John. So what do we have in 1 and 2 Timothy? 1 and 2 Timothy are letters from Paul to his son of the faith, Timothy. And this is a beautiful mentoring session. Paul is writing to his son of the faith. Now, in the Bible, there's 3 sons of the faith of Paul: Titus, Onesimus in the book of Philemon, and Timothy. And Timothy is this incredible, beautiful son of the faith of Paul that follows Paul throughout his ministry, and we're going to have a look at that. Written in about AD 64, it's what's called a pastoral letter. So it's meaning it's Paul, and he's writing in a pastoral capacity to his children of the faith. Timothy is in Ephesus. Do you remember? Jump back to Ephesians. To the study of Ephesians on the Trasher Bible site and have a look at the city of Ephesus. This is a letter from Paul to a senior pastor of a church, and he's writing to him. You're going to hear his language. It's a charge. It's guard. The charge says over and over, and guard and instruct and devote. Paul is impassioning Timothy again because Timothy's discouraged. Any pastors out there that are a little bit discouraged and you're not sure what's going on, you know 1 and 2 Timothy will be your books. These books are going to be instructive, they're going to have church instructions in them, and they're going to be really personal to Timothy. Be strong in the Lord. It's talking about don't have the spirit of fear. You are going to love these books. Okay, so who is Timothy? How we find out about these people in the Bible is we read the Bible. Funny that. So we can go back into Acts and we can have a look at Timothy throughout the Bible, throughout the story of Acts, and find out who he is. Now, Timothy grew up in a place called Derbe. And Derbe was a city that Paul visited. He has a Greek father and a Jewish mother. And the Greek father allowed his Jewish mother to teach Timothy in the ways of the Jewish customs. But he wasn't circumcised. Now, that's going to be a big deal when we come through in Paul's ministry. So Paul visits this city, and Timothy gets saved, and he's about 19. And he ends up going with Paul on these missionary journeys. Now, this is incredible because Timothy goes with Paul to the point where he visits the cities. He's sent to different churches. Paul is church planting all around in the 1st century, doing all these incredible church planting. And what he does is when he leaves a city, he sends Timothy or Titus back into those places to make sure they're okay. So he's like this 2IC of this incredible missionary movement that Paul is on. And it's so amazing. Timothy gets imprisoned with Paul. He goes through all these incredible situations and never leaves Paul's side. It's really beautiful until Paul sends him away. So Paul lives in Ephesus for 3 years, and Timothy assists him as the associate pastor, let's say in our language, and builds this church. Then Paul leaves, and he leaves Timothy to run this church. Now, this church is about 60,000 people. By the time we hit this letter, it's a massive church. And Timothy is a young guy trying to lead this church. He's got stomach issues, he's got intimidation issues, he's got all these things going on. And Paul, his father of the faith, is writing back going, mate, keep going. You're okay. Keep going. It's really beautiful. So we're 7 years into the ministry of Timothy at Ephesus. Timothy is about 30, Paul about 65. So you've got this beautiful relationship between Timothy and Paul. Now, quickly, as you jump back through your New Testament, have a look at how many books in the beginning of the letter it actually says, Paul and Timothy write to you. When you go through the letters, it's like Corinthians says, I and Timothy. It's like Philippians, Paul and Timothy. So Timothy, Colossians says Paul and Timothy. All these books show how Timothy was such an integral part of Paul's ministry. Now we know that in about 97 AD, Timothy actually stays in this church his whole life in Ephesus. He actually ends up dying and martyred in that city. And 97 AD is when Timothy actually dies. And I'm going to read this. The book of Fox Books of Martyrs says this: he remained in Ephesus until 97 AD. And during a pagan celebration, he got so passionate about how wrong this pagan celebration was. He went out into this pagan celebration, and the antagonists and the partygoers ended up beating him to death. And 2 days later, he died. So Timothy in this city, how good is that? Sorry. But you read this letter and he's almost giving up. And we know that he kept going and he stayed there until he died. How great is that? The faithfulness of God and Paul's encouraging letter to Timothy. Okay, so 1 Timothy. You are going to love these books. When you jump into 1 Timothy, Paul is at Colossae and he's writing this letter back to Timothy, and he's talking to him as a young, youthful minister, and he's giving him some instructions. And the instructions that he gives him is this: Paul is a young minister trying to lead older people, and he's struggling. And so you're going to find in chapter 4 where he talks about stand strong. He talks about Timothy is discouraged and he misses Paul and he just wants to go and visit Paul, and Paul's like, keep going. The next thing is he's prone to neglect his pastoral duties. So he's not doing his pastoral duties so well. So Paul's like, mate, you've got to keep going with your pastoral duties. You're going to hear these personal instructions. He's made some hasty decisions in setting up people in different offices and deacons, and so Paul's correcting that. He has a tendency to what's called asceticism, which means bodily discipline. And Paul does these practical things of, when you're drinking water, put a little bit of wine with it. Why? Because it kills the bacteria. So he had a stomach upset. Don't you love how Paul is spiritually, emotionally, physically dealing with everything for Timothy here? It's the most holistic letter, and we're going to have a look at that on TYB. He's having some youthful temptations. This single man in the city of Ephesus is having some youthful temptations, so Paul is instructing him on how to deal with them. He's got false teachers in the church. How good does your church sound right now, by the way? He's counselling, got all these church things going on. So as you read this letter, read the instructions of Paul to Timothy, not just physically, not just spiritually, but these church instructions for Timothy to keep going in the city of Ephesus. Have a ball as you read this letter. Jump in, and we'll see you next week for the snapshot.